So the EU Gangs project was a European project involving 5 countries, so the UK, Cyprus, Greece, and Romania and Italy, essentially to upskill and train practitioners to be able to respond to gangs and serious youth violence in their countries. Coming off the EU Gangs project, going into loads of those different countries around Europe, developing my own understanding about violence. One of my passions and specialities is around engaging with serious youth violence. And one of my concerns as a practitioner, as well as a frontline practitioner, as well as working with families, young people and different members of the community around this particular country, one of my concerns was this issue of how young people utilize social media and how they use that as a platform in order to project elements of violence. So we're talking like your Facebooks, your Instagram, your Snapchats, your Twitters, your YouTube in particular, and also music videos and the way in which music videos have been used as a catalyst to violence. So my concern initially was around how young people use that, and I wanted to research from the perspectives of young people as how do they see the issue of violence in relation to social media. Well, one of the interesting findings was about how young people perceived violence within their communities and how easy accessible social media is used. And in terms of the project, one of the things that I thought was interesting across in terms of the research was what I call the audience and the amplification of violence, in the sense that when something happens online, you've got what's called the trolls, and the trolls essentially will start tweeting or start messaging, and essentially that heightens tensions within communities, predominantly from artists, for example, that make certain types of music that may portray a certain lifestyle, and if something doesn't happen, then the trolls are essentially the ones that project that information. So that was quite interesting, I think, for us in terms of the research. And I think in particular was to raise that awareness for parents and members of the community to look at how young people utilize serious youth violence in relation to using platforms on social media. Because generally, if we look at the prevent agenda and we look at violent extremism or we look at sexual exploitation, there's a lot more that in terms of intervention that looks at some of those issues. But the issues around gangs and serious youth violence, for some reason, oftentimes it gets put on the back foot. And I think that is about raising that awareness. And moreover, it's not just really about just looking at young people, saying that young people are using social media to be violent. So we're not, my intention was never to do a report, or myself and Keir Irwin-Rogers from Catch22, our intention wasn't to further criminalise young people, but rather to explore this issue around social media and what is its correlation between some of the violence that we're seeing within inner cities across the country. Well, I sit within the School of Education, Communities and Families. And I think that this particular research sits really well within that for individuals that are intending to work in schools, intending to work in community, intending to work with families, or to develop practitioners that work within these particular areas. So I think that this particular research can benefit everybody, and also parents, because we have an institution where a lot of our students are parents and have teenagers and sometimes don't understand the correlation between their children watching or playing a game in terms of the reality in which these young people essentially face. So I do think that everybody from the university, not just from particular departments, but I think everybody can benefit from this research, because again, as I said earlier, it is an important aspect that we need to look at. And oftentimes we focus on the violence, we hear about the violence and we say, well, how do we stop it? And I always say we can't stop it until we understand it. So in terms of the report and the research, as of January 2017, it will be available on UCB online. So I'll be very interested to see people's thoughts and views and how they can disseminate that to around the university and to us, the wider community.